Hi, I'm Bathsheba Smith, and CEO and founder of Cage Free Voices. I wanted to offer this course to you especially for those who are trying to juggle parenting and being a teacher at the same time during this COVID season. Um, you might have multiple children, and so hopefully this session will help you with scheduling for your child. And so let's just go ahead and dive right in. One of the first things that you would like to do is to have a meeting with your child or your children when putting together a schedule for online learning. Whether you're homeschooling for for the umbrella organization that you're up under, or you're going through the public school system. I think this will be definitely be not I think I know this will be very helpful to you. So the first thing you want to do is sit your children down. The school year has already started. We're well into the school year. I think this is still helpful for those of you who are trying to grapple with all of what's coming at you at one time. Some of you are trying to figure out how do you keep your child on task with making sure they turn in their assignments, making sure that they're actually joining the sessions for classes. Some parents are now having meetings with instructors only to find that their child or their children are not even showing up for class. So stick it out with me for this particular course, and it'll help you in the process. So you're going to have this meeting with your child or children. So even though the school year has already begun and we're well within the school year, you could stop, take a pause, whether this is during the weekend or during some time in the evening, during a weekday, whenever you have time off. Be sure to schedule time with your children to just have a meeting to get it all done at one time, to get everything organized at one time. So when you have your meeting with your child or your children, you're going to ask these questions. And your first question is going to be, how do you feel about online classes? And in asking this question, make sure you let your students know, your children know. And I want to say that this course is specifically for those who have children who are 6 years old and older. So you may be able to have this conversation with younger kids, but I really want to target the audience of those who are 6 years of age and older. So you're going to ask them, how do they feel about online classes? How do you feel about them? Make sure that they feel like it's a safe space to truly give their opinion. Don't give a rebuttal as soon as you hear your child say something that you don't like. Let them be free to speak, be clear, and let them know that you are free to speak about how you feel concerning online classes. There is no judgment here. And after you hear their response, ask them, what is your favorite time of day? Now, during this favorite time of day, have your child or your children write down what their favorite time of day. And what you're going to do with this time of day is going to be contingent upon whether or not your child is in public school or if you're homeschooling. Everybody's being homeschooled, of course. But if you are homeschooling, without using the public school system. So if your child is being homeschooled, you have more liberty with the answer to this question and what you can do with it than someone who has a child or children in the public school system. So what is your favorite time of day? And then the last question you will ask is, what makes you most comfortable when you're working? You want to make sure you're very clear, you're very keen and honing in on what your child's response is when you ask these questions. If you're having a one-on-one conversation because you only have one child, make sure that you're attentive and you're taking notes so that they know you're taking this seriously. And let them take those notes down too, so that they can have ownership and they are held accountable for what they've said. So if they say, 3 o'clock is my favorite time of day, or it's 6 p.m. is my favorite time of day. Once I get into why this is critical, you're going to remind them of the time of day that they said is their favorite time of day. And then you could also ask them, what makes you most comfortable when you're working? We all like to be comfortable when we're working. I don't know about you, but when I'm reading or when I'm doing certain things, I like to be in a certain kind of environment. So your children, they like to be in certain kinds of environments, or they may even I've had some students who like to eat when they're working, and that's important for your child. Now, again, if your child is in the public school system, depending on the district that you're in, has different stipulations about online learning and what they're able to do when on screen. So we're going to get to this. We're getting to this part of where you're with the schedule, right? Why do we have to ask those questions in the beginning? So that question of what is your favorite? How do you feel about online learning? That's going to be key, because you're going to begin to discuss with your child why they feel the way that they feel about online learning, and maybe even try, well, not maybe, but you're going to try to figure out how you can relieve some of their stressors, because our students are stressed out right now. They're extremely stressed out, more than what you can maybe even comprehend. We are stressed as adults, because you imagine, let's just magnify that their children are resilient, but there a lot of the issues that are in our society right now are being passed down to them, and so they are carrying a lot of the weight. So as much as you can alleviate as possible, try to figure out ways that you can alleviate those things. Now we're getting to the second question of what is your favorite time of day? And I'm going to speak to the homeschool parents first. If your child is saying, my favorite time of day is, I'm not a morning person. Actually, when we think about ourselves, you have a specific time of day where you know that you work your best. You work your best during this time of day. If you have 3 or 4 children, your children may have different times of day where they feel like they work best. And this is specifically to the content that you can control, not the places that, those structured appointment times that you have for things like art or music. I'm talking about your core subjects right now. So if your child says, hey, I really like getting my work done, or my favorite time of day is, I don't know, 2 p.m. in the day. If your child is saying my favorite time of day is 2 p.m. in the day, well, you have to really make sure that your child understands that if we start at 2 o'clock, this is the amount of time that we're going to have to put in, and you won't be finished until this time period. So when your child has that freedom to select their time, then they're more apt to getting the work done that needs to be done, because they feel like they are a part of the process, and they've already expressed, this is when I work my best. A lot of students don't get started in their day. They're not fully alive. I want to say fully alive until around that 10 o'clock mark. They're still waking up, even though school starts at, for some of us, like 7 o'clock, 7:30 in the morning, or maybe 8 o'clock. We start at 8:30. Not here at Cage Free Voices, but I also work in the public school system. So some students start at 8:30 in the morning. They're still groggy. They're still trying to figure out how to, whether or not, they're trying to process all the information that's coming to them. This is the beauty of being able to homeschool during this time. I know you're stressed out, and you're probably asking, how does this fit into my schedule? And I'm going to get into that. And so if your child is telling you, I want to start at 10 o'clock in the morning, or I want to start at 2 o'clock, you guys can negotiate on when you're going to do certain subjects on specific days, and you see how the schedule is mapped out. You can use this, and this document is made available on our website at cfvonlinelearning.com, and then you just simply go to helpful resources, and you'll find this document. So ask your students, and this document says 8 years or plus, but I've seen it also work with students as young as 6 years old. So you can have your child, you can start with the time of day that works for your child. Also, so to give them the option of which subjects they want to work on which days, and move from there. Now, this third question, I'm going to scroll back up here. What makes you most comfortable when you're working? This is critical. Where your child works is going to be important. Now, if you find that if you allow your child to sit, in their bed to work, if you find them starting to fall asleep, you might have to revisit that conversation and say, hey, I'm noticing some things that, during this time you said this is the most comfortable place for you to work, but it seems like you're not getting a lot done. You can always revisit the conversation. This is not I want to say this is a working document, so you can always come back in and make adjustments. You can make adjustments if you find that math is not working on a particular day. You and your children will be able to go in and restructure things. Now, I know you're asking me, how can I create harmony with between my schedule and my child's schedule? You can align your work schedule with your student schedule. For those of you who are in the public school system, I want to backtrack a little bit before we get to aligning schedules. If those of you in the public school system, if your child has to work, they definitely do have to work a specific time. They have a specific time that they have to get their work done. You're going to take that time that they have, that they say, this is my favorite time of day. If it is outside of the work hours that they have for classes, you could take that time to say, hey, take this time to do something for yourself. This is your me time. This is your me time. You can also, if it is within the time that they actually have to take classes, every student has a break in between their classes. And during that break, make sure you just really emphasize the importance of them trying to finish any assignments that they have. If they have assignments like asynchronous work, asynchronous meaning work that they are given and they don't have like an instructor guiding them through that work, they're working on it, is self-paced. So make sure you emphasize the importance of getting it done as soon as possible and giving them the freedom to use the rest of their time to either rest or play video games or whatever it is during their favorite time. If that time falls in that planning time, have them do that then. So coming back to matching your schedules, I wanted to create this little puzzle because it's like putting together a puzzle. So the first thing you want to do is align your work schedule with your student schedule. If you have to go, I'm going to start off with if you work from home. If you work from home, it's a bit easier than if you have to go into the office during this season of the pandemic. So if you are working from home, you know what your work schedule is, and you know and now that you've created a schedule for your student, you want to pay attention to the times that your student has work. And I do this with my daughter all the time. In fact, I'm teaching my daughter and working with her while I'm also getting some other things done and I'm working. And it is probably difficult to believe that, but I'm going to give you some insight into how it can be done. So you want to align your work schedule with your student's schedule. If you know you work from 9 to 5 and your child is saying that I like to start my work at 2 o'clock, and I'm talking again to those who are working from home and they are homeschooling. You are working from home and you are homeschooling, meaning your child is not being homeschooled through the public school system. So your child says, I like getting my work done at 2 o'clock. I like getting started at 2. You work from 9 to 5. Well, guess what? If your child starts at 2 o'clock, most homeschool students don't need to. You can put in 3 hours of work a day and cover a lot of content. So depending on how many hours or how much content you're trying to cover in a day, let's just go with right now 3 hours in a day. So if you are working 9 to 5, your child is starting at 2 o'clock. Well, if you have that flexibility in your work schedule, you can make your lunch hour 2 o'clock. And that's the same time that you can kind of jumpstart your child and help your child or your children get started. Now, if you have multiple children, that means you have multiple schedules, different times that different children want, where different children want to get started. We're going to get to that. We're going to get to how to make all of it work. So you're going to set a time deadline for classwork completion for your students. You'll tell all of your children whether they're starting at 10 o'clock, they're starting at 2 o'clock, they're starting at 1 o'clock. Create a deadline. So if you say you have until 5 p.m. to complete your assignments. You have until 5 p.m. to complete your assignments. Now you're homeschooling, so 3 hours is sufficient time for your child to finish assignments during the school day and for them to cover the amount of content that needs to be covered in a day. Whether you have a child who's starting at 9 a.m. or a child who's starting at 2 p.m., all of your children are still within your 9 to 5 block because you scheduled that deadline time for classwork completion to be at 5 p.m. If you're working an evening shift, if you're working 6 to 12, you can have your students of, hopefully your students want to work in the daytime, but if they want to work at nighttime, we're going to talk about check-in points. So I just wanted to do a quick review. First, you want to match your work schedule with your student schedule. That does not mean that you have to start at the exact same time as your children. That means that you know what your start time is and what the end time should be for their work completion. So if you can match that with the time that you know you're going to be getting off work, if you find a midway point for check-ins, that's what we're getting to now after setting a deadline for classwork completion. You're going to create a question box. Now, I usually use the question box time during the time that I have my lunch hour. Some of you guys are getting overwhelmed because you are taking questions in the middle of working. You're trying to help your kids while you're working, while you're on your computer and fielding calls, whatever, you're in meetings and your kid is still coming to you and asking you questions about a question they have in class. That's where the confusion is. That's where you're getting frustrated. And so I want you to stop that. I want you to stop that. I want you to stop that immediately. You're going to, unless your child is much younger, and I'll think of some ways to create content around how to help your younger children if you have younger children. But I'm talking about those students between 6 years old and older. You're going to create a question box. In fact, you can create a number of question boxes if you have, and you want to do this beforehand. That's why I say you want to do all of this scheduling in one setting. So you can create several question boxes. Let's say your children's names are Zach, Zoe, Amir, and Amy. Zach, Zoe, Amir, and Amy, right? So Zach has his question box. Amir, Zoe, and Amy, they each have a question box. So you can just make one box where you have all the questions. But I would, because I just really like organization, I would have one for each kid. And so they can place, they can drop their questions that they have and explain to your children in that time where you're structuring everything before you restart in the new year. Before you restart in the new year, you have your children, let them know, hey, I'm not going to be able to take the questions while I'm working, but you can put your questions in your question box and keep moving on and working on the materials the content that you understand until I get around to the question box. To your question box. So you schedule that time, whether if you know that your lunch hour is 1 o'clock. I do this often with my child. I take my lunchtime, and during my lunchtime, I'm sitting with her and going through her content. I'm reviewing the information that she's covered. I'm answering any questions that she may have. you can instruct them and then move on and until you can address them, right? So if there are any questions that may take you even more time, you will give them maybe like a pointer here and there about that particular question, and then have them and then put an asterisk next to it, highlight it, whatever you need to do, and circle back. So now we're in this last box, right? When you take a break from working, circle back. If you have another opportunity to take a break, answer any questions in that bin or that box. Make sure you answer student questions during the time frame in which your students, teachers have office hours. I'm specifically speaking to those who are in the public school system. So if you're in the public school system, if your students or your child is in the public school system, you are going to really have to start looking at not just your schedule and your students' schedule. Now you have to start considering when your students' teachers have office hours, and this can be very frustrating because all teachers have different office hours, right? If you find it to be a bit much to try to make to have any questions answered during office hours, that's what the next sheet of this document is for. So you can email your students instructors for questions you are unable to answer. You can do that during office hours, or here we go, if your instructor is not available during the time that your child has questions, or you have questions, or you're able to answer questions. Draft an email with all questions gone unanswered and send it to your child's instructors before the end of the day so they will be able to see the email during office hours. Since you have a bin or box, this should be much easier to keep track of. Be proactive. So to be proactive, state in your email that you would like to request an extension if you do not hear from the instructor prior to the assignment deadline. So if the instructor does not respond within 24 to 48 hours of answering the question, guess what that means? That means that your student, your child, or your children may get those questions wrong. They may not understand that material. And so now, they may be moved on to another part of the content in the classroom, or have a quiz, or the instructor may be challenging them in class and they may be lost on some content. Ask if you can get an extension. So especially if it's an essay and your child has questions that you are unable to answer, ask for an extension since you did not get a response within those 24 to 48 hours, and explain the process if you would like to. You don't have to. The process by which you're helping your child and while you're working. Remember to be flexible with the schedule or guide the school system has provided. As long as the assignments are turned in on their due dates, you have nothing to worry about. You may need to move on to another subject and discuss switching the subjects for the day with your child. Is math too complicated today? And math is too complicated for your child? Simply let them know. Replace it with social studies. Give them the liberty to replace it, and you have that flexibility if you are homeschooling, not under public school. If, however, your child is in public school, they still have some flexibility on what subjects they're going to work on in terms of their asynchronous work and their homework, depending on their school district. So if they need to skip over a subject because it's too difficult when they're working on it by themselves, guess what? Encourage them to move on to the next subject until you can sit down with them later on in the evening if you work in the day, or during the daytime if you work in the evening. So replace it with social studies that was intended for another day, and come back to math the day your child would have been working on social studies. So you just switch the two subjects. And then check your email at the start of the day to see if the teachers have responded, and use teacher responses to navigate the course of the day. Let me know, guys, if you have any questions. Put your questions in the comments. And also, you can shoot us an email to contact@cagefreevoices.com or Smith and at cagefreevoices.com. Don't forget to check out cfbonlinelearning.com so that you can get more assistance. And if you're interested in our online learning one-on-one sessions, we are here to help. And it will definitely supplement the instruction that your child is already being provided.